Welcome to the Soft Cock Week podcast. I'm your host, Renee. As a surrogate partner and intimacy guide, many times clients approach me to fix their dick. This led me to create Soft Cock Week in 2022, an annually celebrated week of education, appreciation, and normalization of the flaccid phallus. I'm so happy you're here. Before we get started, this podcast is not a replacement for medical advice. In fact, when you notice any change in your body, especially in how your penis is functioning, please always seek medical consultation first. Now let's get started. So I want to say welcome to everybody. It looks like we've got about 18 people in the audience. So while we think we're alone, just the 8 of us, we're not. There's people here. And for the people that are watching from the audience, you can interact with us through the chat box. If you want to say hi, let us know where you're from, what brings you to Soft Cock Week. We would love to have that in the chat. And I think you all can see the chat too, right? The guest here? Great. This is my first time using this platform for a live event like this. Last year we used the webinar feature on Zoom, but we thought we'd try something new since we already pay for it. You gotta make it stretch, right? So we're going to start with some introductions so that everybody in the audience knows who we are, and we've kind of gotten to know each other a little bit behind the scenes. Everybody here as guests have been part of this week, whether they've done podcast interviews or they've been part of one of the other events that we've had. We're all really happy to be here talking about soft cock today. I'll start with my introduction. My name is Renee. I am a surrogate partner, intimacy guide, and professional cuddler out of San Diego. And I use she, her pronouns. And I started Soft Cock Week out of a little bit of frustration that I had clients coming to me with these kind of unrealistic expectations about how their dick should work. And it was a joke at first that I would do this month of appreciation. And thankfully I decided a week was better than a month. And sometimes I wonder why I didn't do a day, but here we are. And I'm thrilled that I got the idea, and also a little sad that it took this, like it didn't already exist. I wish this had started a long time ago. Because we certainly know that erectile differences started a long time ago. So I'm going to pass over to Phoenix for an introduction.
Thank you, Michelle. I'm Phoenix Mandel, they, them pronouns. I'm a certified sexuality educator, a sex and relationship counselor, coach, consultant, many hats. And I'm a transgender genderqueer person, and I have a lot of interest in soft cocks, both as someone who has sex with penis owners and loves all of the different states of that, and as someone who occasionally sometimes has my own penis, and I'm just really excited to get more into that. Thank you for having me here. I'm going to pass it to Lee.
Thank you, Phoenix. I'm Lee Jagger, and I'm super happy to be here. I am also from San Diego, and I help women how to have amazing sex lives with partners. I usually work with heterosexual couples, with partners with or without an erect penis. And a lot of women don't know what to do with a soft penis. And so I help them out with that. I teach erotic massage. So very exciting to be in my world. Happy to share any information that I have in my head to everyone.
From your head to your hands,
magic
right?
Hands here. Yeah. One happy couple at a time. So I'll pass this to Mish.
Thanks. Well, I guess I had like 50 odd years of a cock that was hard more often than I knew what to do with. And was an enormous amount of fun along the way. And then I got prostate cancer, and it stopped being hard. And I still want to have fun and I still want to be in a relationship. And I'm kind of really realizing that prostate cancer makes it all more discussable. It's kind of easier to talk about having, being the proud owner of a soft cock when you can say, well, it's because of. So that's an opportunity. And I just see that there's a bit of a wall of shame behind which a whole lot of difficult stuff is being worked out. And I'm just so proud of Michelle and everyone here for kind of dismantling that wall of shame brick by brick. And I'm really happy to be part of that. And I'm just passing on the screen to Amy and Peace Buffalo.
Thank you so much. Hi, I'm Amy Weissfeld, she, her pronouns. I am a somatic sex educator and sexological body worker. My specialties are masturbation and orgasm. And I hope y'all are still hearing
of course,
me.
the timing, right?
We might have lost the
recording
signal
for her, I
there.
think.
I'm looking for somebody.
It might
we've
be,
got some.
yeah.
Okay, we're back.
We'll see.
And I did.
There you go. You're back. Just when you started to introduce yourself,
I'm sorry.
Amy,
Thank
you cut out.
My pronouns are she,
That's
her.
okay.
My name is Amy. I'm a somatic sex educator and sexological body worker. Thrilled to be here. I work with people with all kinds of bodies and all kinds of parts. And my specialty is masturbation.
My name is Peace. I have been taking courses and studying everything from body electric to orgasmic meditation to tantra to kundalini, and recently have been working with individuals and teaching classes, and started collaborating with Amy about a year ago. Really excited to be part of this as we have a book coming out, Joy of the Soft Cock. We're going to pass it to Eric.
Hi, I'm Erica Leroy, and I'm thinking about this. Who am I, right? I am a grandmother to boys. I am a mother. I am a lover, friend, teacher to many, from prenatal all the way through death and dying. And my love is helping people be fully embodied. I have been doing movement education and somatic education now for over 40 years, through lots of different modalities. And I added somatic sex education and sexological body work about 12 years ago so that I could really use the genitals and pleasure as the gateway to really being able to offer holistic health and healing. I lost my partner at the age of 42 to undiagnosed diabetes, and the experience that we had in the years before he died of changing our sexuality to work with what he called his ebbs and flows really changed the way that I learned to play and recreate and have respite care and rejuvenate as sacred space, no matter how either of our bodies showed up, just that we were showing up to make each other feel good. And that really was, the big piece was, you are the playmate that I get to feel good with. And we walk away ready to face the world together or separate and then come back together. So that's who I am right now. And I will pass it to John.
My name's John. I'm upstate New York. My pronouns, I answer to any and all of them. I am a professional cuddler and a sacred intimate, and I work more with people's relationship to their bodies rather than interpersonal relating. The kind of from the tantric perspective, like Himalayan tantra, not the neo tantra of like people having the orgies or even, and the hetero thing. The love that I have for people's bodies and the learning I have gotten from people's experiences is so freeing for myself, for them. And I enjoy this process and I like to support this process. And whether it's emotional or physiological, we're here to enjoy what we have. And as much as we can support or facilitate other people doing that, that's why we're here. Michelle?
Thanks so much. I think the way I envision this 2 hours that we have together is to really just appreciate what we've noticed so far this week. I know some of us were involved in the soft opening, which was an event we had on Sunday as our big kickoff. And then Amy and Peace had a wonderful event on Monday with the 7 strategies to save your sex life. And maybe we have a little bit of that recorded, but maybe we can get a little synopsis of how that went. We've had a week of 7 really great interviews on the podcast and some lovely soft cock love notes that have come out this week that I think those get a lot of really lovely attention on Instagram, because I think people want to see that. They want to see the love. They want to feel the love, right? They oftentimes have their own shame, or they've been shamed by other people. And so, I don't know. It's just a really loving space
Michelle,
tonight.
I hope you'll share a love note somewhere in this journey.
Have I written one? I mean, I've waxed poetically many times about my love of soft
It could be someone
cock,
else's love note.
Oh, I can read some, I suppose, if that sounds good. But I'll start with Sunday night's event and how many of us were there. Phoenix was there, John was there, I think Amy and Peace were there. Yeah. So we had a couple other facilitators, and we had a very different group, and also some people that were there last year, which was really nice to see. We had the same facilitators, plus we added John, so it was a little bonus. And I noticed some of the attendees were the same ones from last year, and I saw their growth. Oh my goodness. And I use growth, I guess it's a weird word to use for Soft Cock Week, but there was one person in the audience, I won't name anybody, but they last year were kind of like very much not going to talk, really stand back. And this year they just happened to be a client of mine. I'll just brag a little bit here. They showed up completely different, so full of confidence and just openness and willing to talk about their experience. And I was a very proud kind of mama bird that my little birdie showed up so powerfully. Anybody else have anything they want to share from that event?
Oop, you're muted, Amy.
I thought the opening was super powerful. I thought it was very invitational. I felt like people I was an audience member. I wasn't on the panel. And I felt like as an audience member, there was a lot of really great information that was given. And it was just a super opening. I'm not gonna be able to talk.
Just to layer in while Amy's hopefully coming back. Oh, movement again.
Where did we cut off?
I was just giving y'all props for making it really easy as an audience member to learn a lot of great information right off the bat, right from the start. It was really powerful.
Thank you.
Thanks, Amy. I loved being with an expansion of our panel, our co-hosting panel from the first year, and just having John come in and bring a whole other layer of perspective, and the discussion that fostered felt really important and powerful and wonderful to share in. And another thing I really loved about that kickoff event was just an opportunity to bring people into greater awareness around different genders and genital configurations that might still relate to soft cock. And particularly, it felt awesome to share, what a packer is and what someone like myself might wear as having an opportunity to be in the everyday existence of having a cock, which is often soft or relaxed. I'm going to show that just briefly here. It is not attached to my body. It is a separate item. So this is my packer. And it's just meant to kind of go in either packer underwear or regular underwear or your pants if you're really confident it's not going to fall down the leg. And it gives you sort of that feel and that shape and that everyday experience, and feels so powerful in so many contexts. And I liked being able to bring that context in.
It was very fun. Very fun. Anybody else want to add anything about that event? John, you feel
it was
good?
A lovely event, and generous, kind, informed people operating and loving outside of what we understand culturally as normal, or what we understand culturally as normal, but is in fact often just like what is portrayed. It's like the images you see at the checkout stand on those magazines, those are not people. That's not normal. And our experiences with our bodies is varied, and it's just lovely to have that a place where people can collectively and in a sense of community talk about what can really happen in a body and what real bodies can look like and how to love with them and love them.
Yeah, it was a good space. We did not record because we really want to keep everyone's privacy and everyone gets to interact together in that group. And so we actually closed the room shortly after the start once we had set our container for the space, and really honored that by not allowing people to kind of come in and out and also not recording. This is really the only recorded event other than, like I said, Amy and Peace have some of theirs recorded, and we're going to share that in a follow-up email after this event so people can catch what was there, the richness that was there. We do have some questions coming in, but I want to do we want to tackle a question and then talk about the next event, kind of sprinkle it through maybe? Okay, cool. So the question is, my husband has chronic heart failure and ED. He really responded well to Lee Jagger's sugar massage. I downloaded that massage too. That was a good one. Which is a soft touch erotic massage she teaches on her website. My question is, what else can I do to make him feel sexy? He just doesn't seem interested in sex anymore, and he was so into it. All of our marriage is literally all of our marriage is literally embarrassed me. I think there's a typo in there, and I'm not great at reading things and changing things. Side note, I'm 53 and he's 63. He was also into using porn videos before, and that embarrassed me. But now I'm so grateful to Lee to give me that sugar touch tool while it lasted. But he just doesn't feel sexy anymore. Thank you so much for sharing that.
There's something to contribute.
Yeah.
To so Julie, thank you for that question. And I'm glad that you used powdered sugar on him. That's great. So I guess I kind of have a question for you. Like, do you touch your husband's genitals outside of the bedroom? Or like when you're talking, when, like in a non-sexual way, like you would put your hand on his lap sitting next to him or hold his hand. Do you hold his genitals? Like, is the only contact with his privates in a sexual framework? because if he's not interested in sex, but he did enjoy that powdered sugar technique, that tells me that he's okay with affection and affectionate touch. And I often tell women in your similar situation to like unpair sexuality with the genitals. Like they don't have to be only touched when someone wants to have an orgasm or whatever. So I highly encourage you to introduce a little bit more non-sexual touch down there, not to make anything happen, but to just be present with him and to just uncouple that. So there's no performance anxiety for him. You kind of like let him off the hook to perform or make anything happen or reciprocate in any way, but to just be present with him with that very private part of his body. That might kind of loosen him up a little bit to being more sexual with you. And I would love to hear what the rest of the panel might have to suggest.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Erica.
I can wait, Phoenix, if you have something you wanted to throw in.
Yeah, just briefly, I wanted to build on what Lee said around non-sexual touch and affection of the genitals and just pull that back to the whole body. And I think because you mentioned feeling embarrassed and sort of this idea that he's not aroused by you because he's not getting hard, and he might feel like you're not aroused by him because he's not getting hard. There's sort of this negative feedback loop happening. So sometimes part of the addressing of that is really, really going back to basics and doing things together that help you to co-regulate and to feel seen by each other. So one technique I really like for this is just to do a hug. You can even do it as sort of like a straddling lap sit, where you line up your heart with your partner's heart, and you take 2 or 3 deep, slow heart breaths together. And doing that kind of synced up, co-regulated physical contact with each other can be so soothing and grounding and connecting. And I think it's really those places that we start when we're trying to build greater non-sexual intimacy, and then that can lead to more erotic intimacy.
Mm-hmm. So what came up for me is I work with a lot of men with medical conditions. And what is written here twice is, that he doesn't feel sexy anymore. And that's really common when you have had medical trauma. Medical trauma, we don't talk about it enough. We especially don't talk about it enough for men. Oftentimes being engaged in the American medical system is for many men the first time that they experience helplessness, right? That our system, it's running around from this doctor to this doctor and this insurance and that insurance, and it can really be fatiguing and exhausting and scary. And we know from like one of the researchers I love, Lisa Feldman Barrett, who talks about like the body brain budgeting, and how our sexuality really is like the bottom line of the neurological budget. So when there is trauma and all of these other pieces, it's really normal to not feel sexy. So I want to first of all just normalize that when you have a chronic condition, medical condition, not feeling sexy is normal. So then kind of what came up for me is, but that doesn't need to be the end of sexuality. It might be like, for instance, one of the things that happened for me with my partner when we went through, our journey of the pre-diabetes that I didn't know about, is that we realized like we really liked exhibitionist and voyeur play, right? So when he wasn't feeling sexy, that didn't mean that I couldn't feel sexy. Actually, what it meant was we created a space where I got to be really enjoying showing him and sharing with him, you know, this, I'm wearing this lingerie because it turns me on. I'm wearing this scent because it turns me on. I'm touching my body this way because it turns me on. And I want to, in the words of sexological bodywork, it's really powerful to be witnessed, right? I actually said that, I wrote down as a note because something that came up in a couple of the different interviews was the quote from Jo Melios, who I really, I admire her work, but the quote, "A watched cock doesn't come," I think it was the quote. And what I wrote down is, but a witnessed cock can, and a worshipped cock can, right? And that there's a difference between watching with a pressure and an expectation versus holding the space of awe. I think that for me is one of the things that came up about listening to all of us is like the body is awesome. And like Michelle, like I love soft cock and all of what it can do, whether it becomes hard or not, because it's just awesome, right? To kind of see all of these different systems in interplay together. And yes, sometimes the blood flow is different, but then the nerves are different. And then so that's kind of what came up for me with this question is, first of all, let's normalize that you don't have to make him feel sexy. You can, if anything, is just make him feel supported, that it fucking sucks to have chronic heart failure, and just that compassion and that like being an ally in the healthcare journey can be really big. And then enjoy your own sexuality, take pictures, film it, see what you can do, but enjoy your own sexuality and share that so that his body feels invited to just be able to be present and enjoy what it is that you are offering, whatever that looks like for you. Yeah, so that's my input.
I would love to jump in on this train. There are a couple things in here. One is he doesn't feel sexy. Part of that may have nothing to do with you. Like, the medical trauma thing, if he's not getting as hard as much. And one of the ways in a relationship like this where it's easier for a man to feel sexy is if he feels like he's pleasing you. And to that extent, give him excuses to touch your body, and not to be inauthentic, but to like really lean in. Like if someone were to touch your cheek and you're like, oh, that feels nice, like express that. Like let your mouth go open, let your eyes go soft, stare into him like a doe-eyed, put your hand on his chest and like, don't do things you don't feel, but the more, and this is a beautiful thing of like building energy in your own body. It's not just for him. You will build a charge, he will feel that charge, and he will feel more sexy because you are having this dance together. And another aspect of this like non-sexual physical touch of just put on a slow song and dance together. Just walk by and put your hand on his shoulder and caress his bicep. You're walking down the street, just take him around whatever it is, like help him feel sexy. By the way, you touch him and he touches you outside of the bedroom, outside of genital focus. And there's also this thing about oral sex of like not knowing what to do with oral sex if the penis isn't hard. And I don't know how graphic or not to indulge here.
I think we're okay. You can say
So,
I'm okay with you saying whatever. People can opt out if they're
but
uncomfortable.
this idea of really, really being present. In the kink world, like the idea of someone licking your toes, like that could be disgusting. But if you have someone who's like single-minded focused meditation, like this is their world, and the whole world goes away and they're condensed to like your toes and their mouth, it is amazing. And you think of the flaccid penis as like some toes, like just explore and have fun. And it's not about, oh, it's getting harder or crescendoing or orgasming or any of these things, but just to play. And the sense of exploration and fun, and it's not goal oriented or objective oriented, can be really beautiful. And also, not to get technical, but if you want to like make the penis hard to play with like the ridge of the head or whatever the things are, I don't know how many people here have ever milked a cow, but this idea of like, here's the teat, you pinch off at the top and you squeeze down as you go, and all the milk shoots out. And so with a flaccid penis, you pinch off and you roll and you open and you roll and you open and you roll, and blood will fill, and you may end up holding the bottom half of a flaccid penis with a finger, two fingers, depending on the length. But if you keep working it that way, the penis will fill, and you will have more sensation and different sensation and a variety of sensations in the head of the penis with which to play with. Okay, I'm done talking now.
Okay, can I piggyback on the joy of playing with a soft penis in your mouth? Like, I'm just gonna say there's no jaw problems. Like, you don't get stressed out. It's easier. I find it way more fun. And when you do it from your own place of pleasure, and it's not in a performance for your partner, but really just enjoying it yourself and letting it roll around on your tongue and all that, I just think it's my favorite. But again, I'm overly enthusiastic about the
Super
soft
quick
penis,
2-second additional add on to that. Often when people are thinking about how to make a soft cock hard or what they want to do with a soft cock, there is a narrowing of focus so much that the balls and the taint and the sphincter and all of these other juicy, yummy areas down there are ignored. And if you can focus some of that cocksucking desire, attention on the balls, on an exciting rim job, those things can also really expand the palette of what's available there.
I hope you can hear me. Julie, I just wanted to address this point, coming back to your concern about him. How can you help him to feel more sexy? And I've learned one of the things in the last 3 or 4 years, 5 years, is photographs. It's something that Erica talked about, and also John, was feeling. Thing is, we often, unless we spend a lot of time in front of a mirror, we don't actually get to look at ourselves. And so you could explore with your partner, taking sexy photos, dressing each other up so that he can see what you see. And in that process, hopefully, he would take some of that in and feel it.
Mm-hmm.
It's the thing that's coming up for me, listening to you all saying such wonderful things. And, as a man, I would just love to have all of the things that you've described done to me. But the one thing that I think, this is a slight diversion, but I think we've already diverged a little bit from the man in the original story with heart disease. And I don't know what that's like. So I just want to acknowledge that I'm shifting a little bit. I do know a bit what it's like as a man to have some kind of health trauma and not be able to get hard. And I think the thing, it's all very well, and I love like all the things you've described, all the things that you've described, having those done to me, they're all fantastic. But the thing that's difficult, and it seems to me, talking to a lot of other men in similar circumstances, that kind of messes with our minds, is a mix between the memory of what we used to be able to do and the yearning to do it again and the sense of expectation. So it might be completely fantastic, but it's very difficult to sort of forget about what I used to be able to do. And I feel like that's been a lot of my journey, is to learn to let go of that. Just learning to receive is quite difficult. If you've been, many heterosexual men are basically tops, and so like I initiate things. To just be the one who is more receiving in every sense. I mean, I love it, but it's a bit confusing. And I know so many other men who much more sort of straight than me and much more find it like, but I need to be doing things. Having things done to me, just for many men, I think, just it sort of feels like a failure, I think. And I don't know if any amount of sugar or cuddles entirely addresses that. And it's an area of interest to me.
Thank you for that, Mish. I appreciate that.
One of the things that I do, a lot is have people talk about wistfully, okay, but not from the grief, but from the memory of great sex that they had. And I do this especially with people who've had medical trauma, because it's really important for the body-mind neurology connection to help the body remember that this was real. Because sometimes what happens is there's also this thing of like, it's so not my reality now. And I have no vision going forward. I can't vision myself. This is why, I use this sort of sports psychology approach, vision what you want to be good at doing, or vision yourself doing something successful, whatever that is. Even if you can't have a heart, if it's not hard, it doesn't matter. Just are you visioning yourself enjoying being with your own body and someone else's body? Or are you visioning, I'm going to get stuck, right? So they get stuck. So sometimes, because there's a crisis of imagination that I see, right, where people have trouble just imagining the whole buffet of what sex is, I begin with, tell me, have you ever had enjoyable sex? And then they start to tell me about enjoyable sex that they've had. And I slow them down and I ask them details and build the scene and really try to get the body to downregulate while remembering. And often what they say to me is, oh, I'm feeling some blood flow, right? And it doesn't have to be, I'm hard as a rock, but, oh, there is some life force that is happening just by allowing myself to remember. And so, for couples where you have something like this, where maybe there's some, patience that needs to happen while going through what's happening now, that to have as a practice, remember when, not even, but like, I'll use, like, this is something for text message too, is like, I'm thinking today about that time 5 years ago when the way your tongue, touched my lips under that tree, right? Still, like, today, just, it's there. So I hear you, Mish, and I totally get exactly what you're saying. And I really have seen from a body mind perspective that like allowing the grief to be there, because that's real, but then also allowing the body to remember that we can harness the good memory for the present, rather than be in the present and be in the, oh, where's it gonna, so that's that piece. And I also just wanted to throw in, while I'm on the mic, andropause is also very real, and it's something that we don't talk about very much, but it's some of the loss of sexual desire in men. We talk a lot about perimenopause and menopause, and we don't really talk enough about that it's natural for there to be shifting hormones in men, just like there is in women in our 50s and our 60s, and that is part of what can happen around desire.
I guess what I'm really coming away from with this particularly this week, is the sense that we don't have to, well, that we probably do have to transform our attitudes to sex as men. That there isn't really another way around it. That if we just yearn for the way it used to be, and we let ourselves be dominated by a sort of mainstream view of what it is to be a sexual man, we're kind of bound to lose out somewhere along the way. Because, quite honestly, as we get older, a whole lot of things are going to stop working. And I think that's the message to put out there, is like, your sexuality is much more than your erection, and your manhood is much more than your sexuality, and libido is actually much more than all of those. And I think you've all been talking about that, but I was sort of sitting with like, can we fix this? And I'm like, no, we can't. We actually have to take it on as men. That this is about, how am I loving? How do I love life? How do I love other people? And I can't go back to the way it used to be. And my own experience of sort of coaxing an erection is it doesn't work very well. They do sometimes just arrive, and it's miraculous, and they're just to be celebrated. But trying to get them, that's where that Joe Milios quote came from, is like trying to get a cock to do this or that. They're a bit unruly, really. That's just how it is. But people with cocks we have to kind of uncouple that narrow sense of the sort of hard cock masculinity, and just take on something bigger, something wider, something more flexible.
Something that ties into that, Mish, is that Amy mentioned this in our Monday webinar, that as we get older, as men get older, their sexuality becomes more like a woman. Right? There's less focus on the cock and more focus on the feelings, less about, the central groin, and more about the light touch of the ear, or, the stroke of the chest. And it's a beautiful thing. And it's an evolution rather than, that's what I'm finding in my 59 years.
And I saw Julie writing. Sorry, Phoenix, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to flag for folks in the conversation, maybe someone could speak to a question around, what is prostate stimulation? How does that look? So I just wanted to flag that question for so many experts in the room on that topic.
We'll circle back to it for sure. I want to hear Mish's
I
thoughts
lost it
here.
because you got me thinking about the fact that I don't have a prostate
Sorry.
anymore. Yeah, it's gone.
I'm sorry.
Oh, I know what it is. I know what it is. It's Julie wrote about sort of the other side of this, of like, she said something like, I've always been receiving and I'm not quite sure what to do now. And I just watched that, my wife and I have been together for 40 years, and it's been, we've always said it's equal, but this has made me realize that, yes, she was more receptive and I was more of a top. and how difficult it is for both of us to shift gears on that as much as we need to. And it's just like 3.5 years is nothing. But I've noticed that she's more sort of, she's always been willing, but more able and more comfortable now with being more of an initiator. And I'm more willing and more able now to just enjoy it. And I just want to sort of say, I want to say to Julie, you said 53. Well, I'm 65. You've got years to learn about this. It doesn't happen overnight. And just because our minds get it, that's what I really see. Like, I got this very quickly. And that mantra about what's bigger than what, libido bigger than masculinity, bigger than sexuality, bigger than erection. That came to me like when I had the surgery in 2020. But to get from the head to the body, it's already taken 4 years, and I'm kind of a little way there.
Mish, I'd like to circle back to something that you mentioned in the being very acutely aware of not being able to get back what you used to be able to do. That subject, because I find that often men will look back on their very hard erect penis days and think, oh, well, those were the best days of my sex life. Like, that's as good as it got. I can no longer get an erection, so therefore that's gone. Bye-bye. And so there's that pinnacle of massive erection, and now I'm down here. Whereas I just want to shed a light on something that most people on the planet are not even aware of, because it's mostly not taught there to anyone. And that's why I teach it. Is that there are, because I love when women come to me and say, yeah, my guy, he's got ED, or, he can't get it up anymore. I actually love that, because it's a door opening to them doing more than just this. It's like, you can't do that anymore with a soft penis, like you have to get more creative. And so that's why I had to create a whole bunch of, like, dozens of techniques to do on a soft penis. And the thing is about that I really want to point out is that there are things that you can do with just your hands, and incorporate the mouth too, and like, it's off the charts. But even just with your hands, that you can do with a penis, hard or soft, that will give him sensations that he never felt having penetrative sex. And so, but that's the default. Oh, well, I've got a hard cock, so I'm going to insert it into her vagina. Like, that's what you do. That's a default. But when they no longer have a hard penis, they have to get a little bit more creative. And most people, men and women, don't really know what to do with a soft penis. And so I'm here to say there are dozens of things that you can do with a soft penis that you never, ever, ever experienced with a hard one. So your days of maximum sensation are not over. They've just begun, if you know where to look. And so I get excited when people say their penis is no longer functional, air quoting big time. Because you're in for the ride of your life if you're willing to just be okay with having a soft penis and having someone do magical things to it.
To me, this goes, I love that. And Lee, I loved so much everything that you said in your interview too. And to me, this really goes to this idea of beginner's mind and about having curiosity, right? That curiosity is the antidote to anxiety, right? That I don't know what's going to happen can be, I don't know what's going to happen, right? And you can flood with cortisol, or you could flood with adrenaline, or you can be like, I don't know what's going to happen. Let's find out. Right? And then you're flooding with serotonin and dopamine. So, just having that mental shift of, we're learning. I have a couple right now, and I'm like, look, some people, they take, cooking classes together as a couple. And you're right. Julie, I'm reading through your thing. Like, this isn't something that is everybody has information about and is taught, but that's why we're here, right? We're all of us on this panel are people who've been like, we want to learn more about pleasure, right? That's what we all have in common is like, I meet people who have gone through I go to a lot of prostate cancer conferences, and I meet men where they're like, you know what? I'm totally fine never having sex again. I'm taking up golf, right? And I meet other men who are like, the doctors didn't tell me I wasn't going to have sexual function anymore. I'm grieving, I'm pissed, right? And they're stuck in that. And then I meet men who are like, what else is there? Because I want to feel whatever this was that I felt in my body that was sexual. I think that I can still feel something like that. It's just going to be different. And that's why we're all here as guides, and why, Mitch, you have the men's group. When I talk to prostate cancer men's groups, it's one of my favorite things to do, because even in that world, especially here in the States, even in that world, I'll go to a conference and like, no one's really talking about the sexual side of things. They'll talk about the urinary side, or they'll talk about, other things, but it's still very taboo to like bring up this thing that is living in the space. So, we're right at the forefront of all of this, but being interested, there's so much information that's out there that to be interested and want to learn, that's sexy, right? That's that sapiosexual side of it.
Pause. Oh my goodness.
So
Okay. So we have a fork in the road. I'm going to make this a choose our own adventure. So we can take a little sidetrack and talk about Amy and Peace's event that they had on Monday and hear about that. Or we can go prostate play. We're going to cover it all one way or another. But I kind of want to roll back to Amy and Peace and get a little check-in of how Monday went. And we'll keep everybody on the line for the prostate conversation.
I'd be happy for us to jump into that. I just want to make sure, Julie, do you feel like you've got some great resources now with that big question you opened with? Was excellent.
So, awesome. Yeah. So one of the things that I found really interesting, and maybe PC want to review what we covered, but before that, it was fascinating that people, we asked for feedback and we got a lot of feedback, but the feedback that we got was anonymous chat to us instead of group chat or actual live questions. And there was lots of engagement and there were lots of questions, but the fact that people weren't willing to ask those questions, without the cloak of anonymity, I think really speaks to the importance of this event. And I knew that was there, but I was still surprised at that level. Yeah.
So the focus, or the title of our talk, was Got Soft Cock Shame. We've talked a little bit about that here in the panel. We offered 7 strategies for saving your sex life. And so you want to pop one back and forth?
Sure.
Strategy number 1?
The first one was just embrace your authentic self. None of these will be surprising.
Right. They all tie in.
Yeah.
The second strategy is to expand the idea of pleasure. So Mish talked about that. Really, I think at one point, expanding beyond PIV. But we also talked about how, as the panelists know, and many of the audience did not know, that there is just as much erectile tissue in the clitoris as there is the penis. In fact, every penis grows from a clitoris. So there was some great discussion around that.
Lots of education. Yeah. The third strategy was connect to yourself, and then you get to decide whether you want to share that with somebody else or not.
Strategy number 4 is focusing on what you're feeling, not what the body is doing, right? I think well, a number of people have mentioned the challenge for a penis owner of receiving. So that is something that's been super powerful for me, just to say to my partner, "Oh, interesting." I mean, there's something like it's a mutual witnessing.
And that trap of performance anxiety, not getting stuck in that.
That's right.
Then the fifth strategy was welcoming toys, which we can talk a whole lot more about at some point if people want, but just completely changing the playing field and not relying on, having a hard cock to get to be satisfied.
That there's so much more than the factory equipment. Strategy number 6 is tune in to turn on. And so that is everything else, from role playing to cosplay to sexy talk to kink, and how normal and mainstream kink is that some people still think it's really like taboo.
And then the last thing is exactly what we're doing here, which is normalizing softness in conversations. Yeah. So it was pretty well attended. There were about 20 people, and it was a very lively chat, as I've said. So it was cool. We'd love to do it again. Yeah. Thanks for asking.
Amy, I just popped that in the chat real quick,
That's
but I missed
great.
number 4, if you don't mind filling that in.
Focus on what you're. Yeah, sure. Well, I'll put it in the chat. Thank you so much, Phoenix.
Yeah. Nice job. And we did not touch on prostate at all, so this is a perfect.
Yeah.
Well, you won't hang out with me for very long and not talk about prostates. So, where shall we start? Is anybody in this room, like, I talk about them, I don't teach about them as often. Is anybody here really versed in this and they can just drop the knowledge quick, or I can run with it? I want to offer it up to any of the more sex educator
I just want to
types.
differentiate, because I think it's important to differentiate that there's prostate specific pleasure, and then when you don't have a prostate, right, then there is also a lot of nerve ending in the anal canal that has nothing to do with prostate. So even if you have a prostate and you are receiving anal touch or anal or with a toy or however it is, that the fullness of the pelvis is ripe with nerve endings and opportunity for things to feel good. So you don't have to have a prostate to enjoy having anal sex, anal touch. I see with a lot of my clients that the ones who have had their prostates removed or have had full prostatectomies, they tend to also really like hitting, like they like a deeper thrust. They like me to use a toy that's longer and deeper because it hits the deeper sphincter, almost like a cervix. So it's like that there's like that cervical sensation, which is different, and then also different angles. So I just, before we get into prostate specific, I feel like sometimes we talk about prostate and you don't have to have a prostate to enjoy everything that is in the pelvis, that are nerves designed to be like, oh, thank you. Right? Thank you for touching me.
Yes, maybe we should say, let's say anal play instead. And acknowledge that some people will have prostates and some people will not. And that goes across all the genders, right? Everyone can enjoy anal stimulation. You reminded me, Erica, my partner does not feel as much from the prostate stimulation as he does from just playing around the entrance, right? That's where he gets most of his feeling from. Every body is different, and it's kind of like the eye exam, you know? Do you like this touch or this touch, this touch or this touch? And that's something that you can look at as a fun game to play with your partner or with yourself. This doesn't have to be partnered play, right? So I think when I think about anal play, a couple things come to mind. First of all, I got to give a shout out to my best friend, Ruby Ryder. She does a bunch of free webinars on pegging, which is strap-on sex for prostate owners or people that had prostates at one time. That's her niche, but she will teach you so much about anal play. And she has like multiple layers of options from like beginner to advanced. So she can take you all the way into the deeper play and bigger toys in that whole realm. If you really find yourself taken off with this and you're like, I need to know more, I'll put the link in the chat. But then the first thing I want to say is you can never have too much lubricant and you can never go slow enough, right? So it's like getting curious with your anus. And the other tidbit is it might get messy and you got to be ready for that, right? If you're afraid of fecal matter, maybe you can do a lot of prep work, but also just figure out what that's about and maybe work on that, because I think that the last thing you want to have is a traumatic experience that builds on more shame. I've been there. I can say I've had that traumatic experience with anal play where I was like, we're never talking about this again. Nope. Vow of silence. This never happened. We're not talking about it, right? And I'm pretty resilient. So in the worst case scenario, your partner might not be that resilient to ever want to come back to that space. So where do we go from here as far as anal play? How deep do we go in
I have
explaining how
some
to do
thoughts
that?
I want to add, but I'm really curious to hear from John first from a sacred intimate perspective about this.
About the anal play or the prostate, or so
The whole universe, anal play, prostate stuff.
so there's so much. It's really interesting. There's so much shame that so many people have around their butts. Like poop is like one of the dirtiest things in our culture, and it comes out of our anus. And so there's this really interesting thing that can happen where kind of socially, interpersonally, the worst place to be vulnerable, to be seen, where this terrible thing can come out, to have that happen and to be loved while you're in that place can be so profoundly healing. It can be so profoundly heart melting. And not that this is emotional, work, but the safer you feel, the more pleasure you can feel. And to if you are willing to get over your fecal fears and play with someone and love them regardless of what shows up, the depth of love that you can achieve, the depth of pleasure, the depth of surrender and intimacy is really profound. I want to cut to in my sacred intimacy training about a decade ago now. There was a scene where we all were anal douching in a bathroom in front of each other. Just kind of like so we can witness other people's shame and reaction and like how do we handle this thing? And it wild experience and really powerful around this is part of all of us, and the idea of normalizing this allows for so much freedom. And yeah, that's my invitation. Thank you for asking.
I'm glad you brought that up, John, because I was going to tell a story, maybe telling stories out of turn, but I was at dinner with Jojo Bear, who was on Monday night's call with us, or Sunday night's call with us. And he was talking about a prostate workshop that he was getting ready to facilitate that weekend. And that was one of the things he shared with me, is that they do a communal flush, I guess you would kind of call it. And he talked about how really healing that can be because of some of our childhood trauma, even just around diapering and things like that, and not being in our consent and being able to take that back there. And I was like really touched by it. And it was an area that I would have never thought could be so profoundly healing, just that kind of exercise. So I'm glad you brought that up, John. I was going to bring it up and share my JoJo story, but yeah, I just think what a wonderful gift. It can be such a barrier sometimes, or a difficulty for people in male bodies to learn to receive, to be penetrated, right? And just for those that do decide to get curious about this, thank you. Like, just really thank you for taking that leap, because it can be kind of a big leap for a lot of people.
The thing that Michelle said earlier that was sort of a jumping off point for me in terms of anal play, she mentioned, using just as much lube as possible. And it's also really important to use the right kind of lube. Not all lubes are good for the body, unfortunately. There's a whole thing about how the FDA doesn't regulate that, and this could be a whole other 2-hour thing that I share with you. But briefly, for anal play, you want to use lubes that are really designed for that purpose, and that could be a hybrid lube, or it could be a silicone lube. But you want something that's a little bit thicker and creamier in consistency, and that's made to last longer there. And if you're doing hand play, really recommend wearing gloves, not because it's dirty, but because the lining of the anus is very sensitive. And even if you've done a great job keeping your nails nice and neat and short, it helps to smooth things out and to protect micro tears and things like that. I recommend the same for toys that go in the anus. It's great to throw a condom on that. So I just wanted to add that about lube, and also that your body has 2 sphincters, and one can be relaxed voluntarily and the other cannot. And so just with soothing other muscles, fibers, etc. in the body, you want to be somewhere that someone can be comfortable, that it's warm. These are just some physical considerations in addition to the emotional vulnerability pieces. I highly recommend having a sex blanket or something that's easily washable, that's your go-to towel for it, that you can put under someone. I wouldn't start with someone on all fours. It's great to be able to look at them and to see their face and to gauge things. Similarly, I wouldn't engage in any of this kind of play for the first several times with any kind of gags or significant other role play element going on. And I also want to say about douching that you can harm your body with too much douching or too deep of douching. And so never, ever, ever, ever use the douching hoses, and don't use any anal, I'm spacing on the word right now, but the numbing creams, please do not use those. So the little tiny enema bulb that you can get at the drugstore is really what you want, with just warm water, not hot, and no solution in it. And I would do that, some significant time before you want to play. And I also wouldn't eat kind of within an hour. Not that you can't play with the anus closer than that, but it helps to make sure people have had a chance to do what they need to do and are feeling a little more comfortable. Also, don't starve yourself. I know some power bottoms that just don't eat they have these weird recipes they follow, or they don't eat all day before a big session, or maybe they're going to the bathhouse. And the thing is that your body burns a lot of calories, and is looking for energy while you're engaging in play, even if you are the receptive person. And so it's important to nourish that body. So I just wanted to throw all those things in there.
I have one more. It shouldn't hurt. Like, don't push too fast. When you relax, it will not hurt. If you are grin and bear it, that's not the way to have a good time. Like, please don't do that. Yeah.
I appreciate all of the hardware comments, and I wanted to kind of... Are we frozen? I just wanted...
Oh, I
if I
think you're
didn't
back.
already, I wanted to appreciate all of the comments on the hardware and come back to some of the software, because it ties into the same shame, right? There's so much conditioning about, John Wayne and the way to be a man and the erect penis and the toughness and the skip the feelings and all of that. And part of that is never have anything in the anus, right? That is a sign of weakness and like possibly more uh, like shame around that than a soft cock. And so I just wanted to kind of say that we're in this realm of talking about what things mean to us. And what has been so important for me is dissociating all of that conditioning from what I really feel and what I allow myself, and knowing that my masculinity and my personhood has nothing to do with anybody else's opinions of my pleasure, as long as I'm not harming anybody else. I just want to make sure that the people who are hearing this remember to come back to that, the training, right? That stuff that we have been taught for so many, whether it's years or decades.
Okay, I'm going to scan the chat and see if what I've missed. If anybody wants to
I'll fill
fill
some space just on the
please feel
subject of
free.
prostate. I'm looking at my notes from this week, and one of the things that I wanted to bring up, having to do, so first of all, I always like to share with people the Harvard prostate cancer study. So Harvard did a study. It was a 30-year longitudinal study with 300 men in the healthcare profession, and a similar study was done in either New Zealand or Australia at the same time with an even larger cohort. And they tracked these men for 30 years, and the end result, one of the end results of the study is that what they found was men over 40 who ejaculated, which you can have an ejaculation without an erection, and you can have an ejaculation without an orgasm, right? But that men over 40 who ejaculated on average 21 times a month, that is 4 to 5 times a week, had a 30% lower incidence of prostate cancer in ages late 60s to 70s, which is often where most men, they're sort of where we are with prostate cancer is where we were with breast cancer in like the 50s, right? So that's one thing, is just in terms of like a lot of times with men that I work with around de-shaming, I just take it to health. Like this, if you have a prostate, it's just really good to, move this fluid out, right? It's a lot easier to move fluid out of the pelvis than it is through sweating it out your pores or trying to think it out your head, right? And then one of the things about prostate cancer that's interesting is that what they say is that if you already have erectile issues going into it, then you're pretty much guaranteed that you're going to lose erectile function as part of that prostate cancer journey. So having prehab, where if you, to actually work on erectile function and erectile flow up front, often sometimes, and Mish, I don't know what what you probably have a better sense of what's going on with this, worldwide, but that, sometimes that'll be a referral to a physical therapist, but it may not really be focused on like, let's really hang out and talk about how you masturbate and how are you doing this and what's the technique. A lot of times it just goes straight to the pump. Or something like that. So, and then after prostate cancer surgery, especially if it's surgery or radiation, they really, the actual medical protocol is you really want to be masturbating and working on the tissue for that first 2 years. And again, when you have medical trauma, sometimes the last thing that you want to be doing is touching yourself and trying to do this. And so it can feel more like a chore, or again, that's where it becomes more of a pump. But if we can really see that it's a healthy system, both whether you're doing it in recovery or you're doing it preventatively, to get erectile, all of the nerves, the fluids, the blood, the muscles, the fascia. There's 4 different fascial systems that run through the genitals, and like that can be where you're getting some shrinkage or where things can adhere. So I just wanted to normalize and say that like prehab, rehab is super important. And unfortunately, in this country where sex work is not legal, that becomes really challenging because nurses and the medical community tend to only work to the muscular side and don't really work on the full fascial element of what's happening with the like the tunica and the other pieces internally in the penis. So just that's more prostate.
Super quick
And
flag that
just
pelvic PTs also work, not all of them, but some of them work with male pelvises as well. Sorry, Mish, go ahead. Mish, go ahead.
Thanks. Just since you asked, Erica, I mean, it's definitely a problem worldwide. There are just even physical therapy rehab is pretty rare. Like I had to search for, it took me 6 months to find somebody because my surgeon didn't even know how to refer me. And it's pretty much universal that prehab is very rare. And then the sort of depth that you're speaking about, almost unheard of. I was speaking at a Institute for Psychosexual Medicine conference in London this morning, and they had a physiotherapist talking in some depth, but almost all the audience was like, wow, I didn't even realize there was like a male physiotherapy specialization. And he was kind of explaining about the different muscle groups, because most people, and I think I saw it somewhere in the chat, most people kind of go, oh, we've got to just do your Kegels. There's this like incredibly simplistic view of how it all works. And thank you, Erica, for just naming some of the enormous complexity. And I guess what you and I are both doing is inviting people to get informed if this is happening to you, and medical professionals to get out there and actually help with this.
And I want to say too that this is also, again, I know the stats here in this country, but prostate cancer and erectile issues, because it's diabetes and heart condition, are also so much more prevalent in the African American community, which is the community that I work a lot with. And all of my lovers and partners and husbands and my children are. And so that's an element as well, is that, there's a lot that we're not, we're really not educating, we're really not being, giving enough information into, and that community, the African American community, has even more cultural shame around, what does it mean to be a man, and what does it mean to be hard, and what does it mean in porn to be the BBC and all of this. So, and yet they're struck, at a much higher proportion with these issues. So, that's something. Oh, that's why I have in my note, we need more porn and erotica that reflects all of these realities, so that instead of saying porn isn't real, that what we actually have is porn, real porn, right? That we need to see porn with soft cocks and with, people enjoying anal that isn't all just humiliation. And
well, Michelle and I talked about that in the podcast we did, and kind of came up with like a call for more soft cock erotica. And since we talked, Michelle, I went to a written erotica site called Lit Erotica, so not pictorial but written, and they have tags. So I searched for the tag soft cock, and there's at least 500,000 stories on that website. The number of, and if you search for big tits or BBC or whatever, you're going to get like 20,000 or 50,000 or 150,000 stories. Search for soft cock, you get 16 stories. And all but maybe 2 of them actually, like there's a soft cock just at the beginning, and then it's all triumphant about how it gets hard anyway. So there's some work to be done. And I know quite a few men who are writing soft cock erotica and having fun with it, and also treating it as a form of self-therapy to just, live in the imagination as well as in the practicality. So watch the space.
I'm doing a little bit of a search because I did, after we talked, Mish, I tweeted Literotica about this, and they responded, and I'm trying to find the response, and here it is. It said, I think one of the suggestions was the soft cock. Yeah, that doesn't help. Is that what, did you see that response from them,
I did see your
Mish, by any
tweet.
chance?
What I've been sort of working on with another quite prolific author on that site is trying to persuade them to have they have these sort of promotions, competitions, to have a soft cock erotica competition for next year's soft cock week. And I promised the guy that I would write a blurb after this week to kind of explain the whole thing and position it with them. So who knows? I think it's a great opportunity, because I do think this is. Somebody said that the prostate cancer sort of community is like 50 years behind the breast cancer community, and I think it is. And I've been talking to and inspired by the women pioneers of that shift, and still got lots more to learn. But there's something about claiming our right to be sexual beings with different bodies that's a fundamental thing to be done, and it's time.
I think.
Well, I am super supportive of that. I did learn this week that YouTube will take down any links to Literotica in your show notes, and I probably got a little strike against me, and they hit me for Literotica and they hit me for Ruby Writer's website. So all of you professionals, don't link to either one of those.
I think this also applies a lot to people, not just of varying ability life stages, but when you have some kind of accident and there's an adjustment that happens, and natural aging and the adjustments that happen with that. And I have a chronic pain condition, and some days things are great to do a particular activity, and other days they would be a nightmare and would, put me down for a week. And I think something I find really valuable in sites like Literotica is the audio component, where there's no visual and it's just an audio porn. And this is something that, as someone who's highly visual and often distracted by visuals that don't work for me in video forms of porn, really feels accessible, even in times where I'm like, this body does not do that thing. I don't know why we're talking about it. And in the realm of some of the suggestions made earlier around ways couples and larger groupings of people who are together can support each other, taking sexy pictures and things like that. I think also just doing short little recordings of kind of, oh, remember when, like Erica was speaking to, or something I'd really love to do to you is, and I think we can also do that for ourselves. So I just want to plug that audio version.
We've been talking about erotica and how there is or isn't an incorporation of, we've talked about soft cock, we've talked about butt stuff, right? Something that just occurred to me, we talked about in Monday's webinar, was that many people don't know that many people don't know that there are toys, stimulating toys for male equipment, right? It's always, not always, but it's mostly, we think about the dildo, etc., right? The rabbit. But one of the things that I mentioned and that people had really responded positively to is this idea of the frenulum vibrator. It's there are a number of them made. One of the brands as Hot Octopussy, and it is really a delightful way for a penis owner who either doesn't have an erection or can't have an erection to be able to stimulate. So I thought that was either self-stimulate or with a partner. They make a pulse, and they make a pulse duo, which actually has motors on both sides, so there can be riding on top. Anyway, just thought that might be of interest. And I'm curious, do any other panelists know of other things in this regard?
I am familiar with those two. I did an interview with Shameless Sex, and one of the hosts on Shameless Sex is part owner or runs or somehow connected to Hot Octopus, and so she sent me both the regular and the duo. And I know that the oscillation that those use is like borrowed from some medical device or something like that. That there's been a lot of science behind the technique that they're using with that toy. But I'm sure there's others that are, different makes and models, but that's the one. That's
I
the only
would
one
give
I'm
a shout
familiar
out
with.
to
Erica, did you have something?
I think one of the most wonderful things to do with a soft cock is to get that coronal head and frenulum rub against the clitoris and the labial folds, and really have that, because everything we're talking about, I even was thinking back to Julie's question about, how do I help them feel sexy? It's also, many of us are work, through the body, and one of the things that we are trained in and that we know really has to do with the activated hand, right? That when I first was in massage school in like 1988, okay, so that was when I started that world. And one of the exercises that they had us do is we had to pair up, and we were just doing a laying on of hands. So we were sitting across from each other, and you were just going to take your two hands and put them on the other person's legs, right? And the exercise was the person who was giving had to think of something that made them happy, think of something that made them angry, think of something that was distracting, and think of something sexual, right? And then they have the thought, so you engage in the thought, and then you just lay hands. You're not touching, you're not doing anything, it's just a laying on of hands. And then the person who receives guesses after, like, I think this was, you were distracted, this is da-da-da, this was da-da-da-da-da. And often sexual was the thing that was easiest to feel. And in massage school, the purpose of this exercise was, so don't do that. Right? Don't lay hands if you're distracted. Don't lay hands if you're angry. Don't lay hands if you're feeling sexy. Only happy, right? Only happy, healing touch. Yep. So whatever we do with our hands, whatever we do with our bodies, there's that element of charge. And I think that, when you're soft, it's still nerve to nerve. And sometimes with a hard cock, because the blood flow is stretching out the skin in ways where sometimes the external nerves aren't really, it's a different kind of sensitivity. But when it's soft, to be able to play on the labia and play on the clitoris and feel that connection, that frenulum connection, is like really, really, that's like, for me, that's like that's what gets me juicy and squirting and just kind of that whole like piece. So, I love toys, but I also really feel like people don't know what to do with their hands. Right. And our hands are what, and Lee, I really got this from, what you're teaching too. It's like, I think about this with the anal. Like when I have clients who want anal play, I always say it's always going to be hands first, and I'm always gloved, right? Because I can feel, there isn't anything I can't feel, through a glove, because I'm sensitized to feeling what is in there. But, and it's so interesting how sometimes I'll have clients who like bring me like a giant dildo, and they'll be like, this is what I want up my ass. And then like, I'm like, well, we'll work up to that. And then like, just my finger is like enough, right? Because we're hitting all of the subtle places. So, that's, yeah, that's what I wanted to say about that. Sorry, I just got a little rambly, but you got me excited there, piece around like, woo, frenulum play. And while I'm here, and then I'm going to stop talking for the rest of the time because I know I've been taking that. But I have something I wrote down that I wanted to hear what the rest of you had to think about, because sometimes one of the things that I see frequently is that I'll get people, and this is often with younger men, where they come with premature ejaculation and then ED. So it's like I come too quick, and then that's it. I can't get hard again. And I think that one of the things that I have noticed is that we don't, again, when we're trying to come up with or to give more normalization and languaging, that I think a lot of men don't understand what a refractory period is. And that, that the penis, can needs to rest. And for some men, the refractory period might be 3 days. And for some men, it might be 3 hours. And for some, it might be 30 minutes. But that what I've seen with the men that I work with PE is that often they're demoralized and they give up instead of hanging out in the refractory period and continuing to play, continuing to find pleasure, to do some oral stuff or some hand stuff or some other stuff, and then see if there is some, the cock then kind of is like, oh, I'm invited again. Oh, I'm interested again. But if we shut it off, oh, now I'm done. That's it. I feel bad. Blah, 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 then we're missing what can happen because we don't even give the penis an opportunity to come back around. So I'm curious, I'm throwing that question out to all of you in terms of anything about PEED and also thoughts about refractory.
20-second thing about what you just said, Erica, with the hands first. I also just want to flag that, often, this makes sense. These are our grippers. We're reaching for things sort of palm down, hand first in a grabbing way. And by experimenting with using the back of your hand, using the inside of your wrist, using your cheek to sort of nuzzle the way you might nuzzle your lover's cheek or their neck, these things can be incredibly stimulating for all of the people involved.
Love that. And also, can we backtrack just a smidge that a lot of us we're experts in this field, and I'm imagining that some of our viewers don't even know what a frenulum is and have never even heard of it. So like Phoenix, you had I don't have my dildo with me. Does anyone have a dildo where they can actually show the frenulum? Yeah. Where the part of the head that kind of goes up, it's very, very juicy in there. A lot of sensations in there. And so, yeah, I just know I have a lot of female clients and they don't know any of those male body parts. And even men don't know the names of their body parts. So I just wanted to make sure that the women knew what we were talking about when we said frenulum. Thank you.
I'm very interested to see somebody raising the question of orgasms, because I think, it's something that I didn't think would ever happen to me, but it has happened a bit lately. That it's slightly more difficult to have orgasms than before. And we earlier spoke about how if anybody moves our focus away from the genitals, we can have more of a full body orgasm. And, I've been really enjoying that. But it's been very interesting experiencing delayed orgasm. And actually, I read Mantak Chia's books. I think, John, you mentioned some of his work, or somebody else mentioned some of his work. I read his books 15 years ago, and thought it was the coolest thing. And I thought it would be cool to be able to separate ejaculation from orgasm. And I couldn't quite get there. I kind of got halfway there, and I feel like I learned a lot in the process, but I didn't get all the way there. I think now it's kind of just happening to me naturally. And it's the coolest thing to be able to have a peak experience that is a climax, that, is an orgasm, really, but doesn't have the sort of pulsating energy that I associate with most male and female orgasms. And it's like, it's the coolest thing. It's got all the same excitement. It hasn't got the pulsing, and it hasn't got much of a refractory period either. And a lot of men after prostate cancer talk about becoming multiply orgasmic. And I'm super curious whether what I just described is what's happening to them as well, or whether this is a different thing.
I know my ex-husband was very much multi-orgasmic without ejaculation. And we would count. Now, if people don't know my history, sex was a challenge in our relationship because he was very much needed something every day, whether I wanted to be there or not. So there's coercion. There's a lot of yuckiness behind this. But I will say he had figured this thing out for himself, which was not to my benefit, because we would count how many orgasms he could have, and I wasn't having any. So, but it is definitely seems a lot like what you described, Mish, where he could just keep kind of like I can roll. I see myself flush. I got a little embarrassed with that. I can roll with orgasms. Like it's like riding a wave, right? And it seems like it's exactly the same thing that I would witness.
With the ejaculation piece, I will just name, if you haven't played around with coming multiple times in a day or doing multiple orgasms in a shorter period, ejaculate tends to decrease in either amount or like thickness of consistency as penises come multiple times. And so if it's a little bit watery on that third time, that's completely normal body process, and don't be worried about that. And if you're someone who likes to play with coming a lot, coming all over someone, giving someone a facial, there are toys and lots of fun homemade cum recipes online that can help create that experience.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, in my more mask hardcore moments, I do want to come all over everything.
There's a beautiful thing around the play of that, and the idea of toys and props and prosthetic body parts. Like, I have a box of cocks, and sometimes, it's like someone wants to play, I'd be like, open up this thing. It's like, okay, point to what you think would feel good. And sometimes it's like, I would like to start here and then go to here and then go to here and then go back to here. It's like, no, there, if you let go of the ego of your own penis has to do it all, the amount of pleasure and versatility and resilience and endurance that is available to you if you are willing to strap on is amazing. If you really want to be giving. And not everyone, like some people are like, I need a heartbeat or nothing. Like, some people just are not interested in prosthetics, but like, it can be so much fun if they are, and fun to play with. And also going back to Mish, what Mish was saying. Mish? Sorry, I'm
Mish.
Thank you, Mish. Thank you. My brain just slipped that out. The best sex I've had in my life was non-ejaculatory and non-penetrative. And this idea of like, for those of you out there who think, okay, sex is only PIV and it's only ejaculatory, like, there is so much pleasure to be had. Resounding, resilient, continuous, repeated, multiple full body orgasms that can blow your mind and connect you even more than the short build and peak of traditional sex. In some ways, having a soft cock or interacting with is like an invitation to dive deeper into a greater pleasure, because the easiest path isn't open, but there are more rewarding paths.
Well said. Thank you, John.
One of the things that runs through so much of the discussion tonight and all of the work that we do is helping people to think differently, right? That it comes from here and then it emanates elsewhere. And so I wanted to bring up something that actually hadn't occurred to me before and certainly wasn't part of our webinar on Monday, but as somebody who has been vegetarian for a long time, I've seen the food products industry evolve so that 40 years ago, like soy milk was a thing, and now there's almond milk and hemp milk and all of these different kinds of oat milk that people can find different tastes and say, oh, well, maybe I don't want to keep having lactose-based milk, and I'll try something different. And I think these kind of examples are so helpful for people who are listening to be able to say, oh, wait, maybe I can have sex that as my body ages from one decade into the next, or I'm on a new antidepressant and I can't do what I used to think about it in a way of, wait a minute, that it's just different. It's no less. It's not that I mourn. I mean, I can still have grief about it, but the excitement of what am I evolving into, I think, is the most exciting part of this.
I don't have a penis, but I'm going through my own kind of change of life as I'm in perimenopause, and things just aren't the way they used to be. And I'm working really hard myself to just be like, what's next, in a joyful kind of curiosity way, rather than, again, trying to go back to the way things used to be, and like letting that go and just being like, maybe I don't want to go back to the way things used to be. I am a different person now than I was at that time. This is just all part of the evolution, and it doesn't seem to do any good to sit and really reflect on how things used to be for me. And I want to remind people, we all go through changes. It's not just penis owners that go through changes. We are all going through changes. We change every day, hopefully in the positive direction, right? And some of these things we can't control, and we have a couple choices, right? We can take our time to grieve. Please do that. But then, do you want to have a sex life again? It's there for you. You just need to go out and think of it in a whole new way. Kind of like erase the chalkboard in your head of what sex is supposed to be. Like I heard on a podcast this week, not one of my podcasts, about moving away from linear sex to circular sex. And we've talked about that in so many different ways this week, right? But I loved the visual that he gave, was to think of sex as like a 70s rotating bed, right? And all the different sexual acts are around the edge of that bed. And that bed just keeps turning and you just keep popping into different places, rather than doing what used to probably work for most of us, which was the linear path. Right. And I loved that visual and wanted to pass it forward into
I love
this
that,
community.
Michelle, so much. And it makes me think of the languaging around internal versus external. And I've just dropped the other one out of my brain completely. It'll come back to me. But just sometimes shifting the words we use to describe a process can be so helpful for us in approaching doing different things with our bodies. I mean, our brains love variety, our bodies need variety. Even if you love to get fucked hard, you can't have that every time. It's not good for you to have it every single time. And hey, sometimes the delayed gratification is an extra bit. I do want to also mention that pussies need lubrication as well. And there are a lot of lubes on the market that really shouldn't go in pussies. And please hit me up if you're curious about lube facts. I'd love to talk to you about it more.
On the defining, I think that's a really interesting piece too. So I had a I had a partner a while back. It was the first time we were having sex, or he came over to have sex, and because the cock was soft, right? And I think I was the first partner he's ever had where I was like, cool, that works for me. Like, and I saw him, kind of still being like, but this is what I'm supposed to do, and I'm so sorry. But this man, I have a 34 triple H chest. And most men don't really know what to do with my boobs, right? It's like, woo, boobs, but like actually knowing like how to handle them and suck them and touch them, it's like they don't really know what to do with them. And this man had the best boob game I've ever experienced. I had multiple orgasms from the way that he was touching my breasts and there's so much connection between the nipples for all genders, for all bodies. We are just wired. The nipples are wired to release oxytocin, right? The nipples are wired to contract the pelvis, right? That's why when we nurse, we're actually, contracting the uterus and contracting the pelvic muscles. So I was in heaven, but he was still afterwards apologizing. And I said, hey, look, for me, sex is outer course, inner course, it's all of that. And he said, I've never heard the term outer course. And I was like, yes, and I think we kind of call what we're now calling outer course, we used to call foreplay, right? And I think that also has done a number on people, because there's this idea of like there's an order of things, as opposed to like what I learned with my partner who passed away was, oh, when your cock can penetrate, we do penetrative sex, we do penetrative play. And when it can't do penetrative play, then we do other types of play. We do all that. We do more oral, we do more hand, we bring in more toys, we touch other parts of our body, we do other things. But that, expanding the definition of sex to, for me, my definition of sex is the activity that you do with yourself or a partner in which the entirety of your body is allowed to be present, right? Because most of our time we're walking around with 97% of our body being allowed to be present, and this part that's our genitals like having to be shut down. And then we pressure that part of our body to when it's sex, and then it's all about that, right? And not the whole rest of the body. But if we say, I have this amount of time to be fully embodied, fully present with myself, and feel how touching my genital nerves actually, I can readjust my spine with the way I touch my clitoris, right? Finding those different connections that expands it, that an orgasm is just build up and release. And that can happen on my arm, and that can happen on my neck, that feeling of ah, 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 right? That's all it is, right? It's just an opportunity and an invitation to like feel the tension and then let it go. And that's, that helps. I think it really helps to open up, and for each individual to define for themselves, oh, this is what I want to think of as sex, right? This works for me, and not this, it's just this.
We had this conversation on today's episode with Joe Court. We talked about the term sides, which is a term he came up with. I guess he said he published it in 2013 in Huffington Post, but the idea of originally gay men that weren't tops or bottoms. They didn't want any penetrative sex to give or receive, right? And who's to say that is just a thing that's safe for gay men, right? I think that, while I love the whole buffet of sex, if I had to choose just one area of the sexual buffet, it would not be penis and vagina sex. It is not my favorite form of sex. And so like all genders can like different parts of the sexual buffet. And I think we're told it's supposed to be this certain thing, that you're supposed to like this thing. And what is it like to be a penis haver that doesn't like intercourse or anal intercourse, right? Whether it's pussy, anal, whatever, right? What is it to actually step outside of what you're supposed to like? Maybe you really love oral sex. Maybe that would be the thing that you would take to that deserted island with you. And I appreciate Joe for having the term side and having a little army of people that got it really normalized in the gay community. And I think what we talked about in our interview is a lot of like, you don't have to be a gay man to use that term, right? It's available to any of us that identify that way, and we could take the shame away. Well, we are coming to the end of our time together. I want to give everyone a chance to say any last anythings that's coming to mind. It doesn't have to make sense or even go with what we've talked about.
I have one last thing that I would like to share. This kind of this invitation towards letting go of gender. This idea of we all start out with our genitals looking the same at a certain point in fetal development. And as we age and our primary hormones shift, men will grow breasts and can actually breastfeed, and women can grow beards. And like, there's this kind of like remerging thing that happens. And in this stretch of time, it's like, okay, the penis can get erect and the uterus can make babies, but like, we all kind of start in the same place and we all kind of go to the same place. And because this is, about soft cocks, it's like, if you think of it in this way, of you're not a man or a woman, but you're a person and you have this body, and it doesn't, you don't have to think of it as a penis. Like, it's like the penis is the same tissue as a clitoris. Like, you've got a really interesting, malleable, external, playable with clitoris. That's like, and if you're willing to like go to that place of like, I am a person and here's a body with nerve endings and sensations, like, what a lovely place to be and play and exist and explore. And that's it's not for everybody, but if you're open to it, there's a lot of pleasure and play and mind opening, soul opening to be had there. Thank you, Phoenix.
Well, I love this topic all day long, so I really appreciate you saying that.
Something I'd really like to appreciate about this conversation is, from where I sit, the energy was a bit more sort of frenetic to begin with, and it's just sort of eased as the time has gone by. And I guess I want that for the world. There's this sort of freneticness about, am I doing sex right, and can I get what I want, and it feels like there's this sort of ease that's been going on the last half hour or so about, anything goes. So thank you all for creating that.
I love that we have this forum to be able to have a conversation. And someone in the chat said, thank you. I hope there's more of this, because this is such a subject full of taboo and shame and judgment. And so I'm just so appreciative to everyone on the panel here, and especially to Michelle to set all this up, to help normalize these conversations and bring in new thought and more accepting expressions of love and unconditional touch and all of that. Like, I'm just so grateful to be a part of this and just so grateful that this exists. So thank you to everyone here.
What you just said, Lee, makes me think of both an expanding and an appreciation for these different ways of moving and being and pleasure and feeling pleasure, and also that sometimes people want to be wanted in a very stud goddess sex focused way, and that finding opportunities to really genuinely lean into that when a cock is relaxed, or when these other things are happening, I think is such a precious thing to remember, that people can have that intensity or that drive in a different direction. And this is somewhere that I think role play can be really, really helpful for folks.
For me, it's just a reminder that it's really supposed to be all about pleasure, right? It's supposed to be fun. And we all have this pleasure ceiling that we lower for a variety of reasons. So if someone out there is wondering, like, what should I do? What can I do? Where can I take this, right? From all of this amazing expansion and expanding conversation that we've been having, 2 questions to ask are, what would make this feel even better in this moment? And now in this moment, and now in this moment, and how much pleasure can I allow myself to feel? Thank you all for allowing me and us into the conversation. It's been an absolute pleasure. Speaking of pleasure,
Yeah. I love normalizing the ease in which we all talk about these topics. And I know a lot of that is because we are professionals, or we've really immersed ourselves in this space. But I know from personal experience that just hearing someone talk so easily and freely like this, it has an effect on people. It makes them realize they can potentially do that too. And so just like last year's soft cocktail mixer, I think the same feeling as I close this one out is just, wow, how great it is to get such a wonderful group of people together to just pick a topic and geek out on it. And so thank you all for geeking out with me and everybody that showed up. I think we ended up with, I think, around 20 people in the audience. And I just thank you for the second annual Soft Cock Week was a huge success. I feel very full. And I thank you all for being in it with me.
Thank you so much for making it happen.
Thank you.
Wow, do I enjoy talking about soft cock. Thank you for listening. If you didn't catch the video version, I invite you to find us on YouTube or Spotify with video. If you found this podcast to be helpful and you feel you can give us 5 stars, I invite you to rate and review us on your favorite podcast app. New episodes of the Soft Cock Week podcast only drop during the week of Soft Cock Week, so please make sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss any of them. Lastly, give us a follow on social media and check out our resources, Softcock love notes, and events at softcockweek.com. Signing off from Southern California with so much love. Mwah.